Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland, and in this episode, we'll be reviewing this custom racing steering wheel built by Johan Dreyer, who is the owner of Solid Sim Racing Gear, a company that's located over in the Netherlands. So let's get to it. Okay, now for a close-up look of the wheel. Obviously, this is a very red wheel. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about having a red wheel on my rig. I usually have black ones, obviously, like most of you. But it kind of is starting to grow on me because I have a 6-point harness that is red, and the actuator covers on my rig are red, so it kind of goes together. Anyway, this wheel itself feels very good in hand. As soon as you pick this up, the whole assembled unit feels very solid, no flex whatsoever. This is a Sportline steering wheel. And I've never actually handled a Sportline steering wheel before. It's 300 millimeters as far as the diameter for the grips are. And it really feels good. These are very thick grips. I don't know if the camera can really relate how thick this is, but they are very thick grips. And they remind me of my OMP Super Quadro grips, which are also very thick, and I like that feel in a wheel. It's opposed to the thinner ones that I can wrap my fingers all around that bumps into my thumb. I can't do that with this type of grip. So I really like this wheel. And I actually went online and looked up the Sportline wheels, and they're priced pretty reasonably, $150, $160 for these wheels versus a $220, $230 for a Momo or an OMP or a Sparco. And there's no flex in these. These really stack up quite well against those name brand racing wheels. So I'm going to have to take a closer look at these wheels. I'm glad I got my hands on this. Now, that's an aluminum plate again up here. Back here we'll see a carbon plate that is mounted to an aluminum housing. This whole aluminum housing is one piece here. It's not bolted together. And there's a ledge that's been machined into the edge here that this carbon plate lays into. The carbon plate itself has some nice screen printing in it, and all that is customizable, by the way. Johan can put whatever you want on these plates as far as the screen printing goes. So you can customize your plate to look very professional and just the way you want it. Different colors, obviously it doesn't have to be yellow, it could be white or whatever. And now we'll take a look at these actual controls here. I really like these. These rotaries that he's using here are very nice feeling. You can feel the clicks pretty well, and you can actually know when you've made a click, even when I have my gloves on. And some rotaries I've had before were really vague, or some of them were really hard to turn, and these are kind of like in the middle, and they feel pretty good. Now, they also, when I get a wheel or a button plate, I'll put it on the game controller Windows program just to make sure all the buttons are being pressed when you press them and all that kind of stuff. And some of these rotaries, and this is just a point that I like to bring to all my videos, is little things that I discovered, that some of the rotaries I've had before on some of my wheel pods, if you spin them too fast, they'll like skip a couple of lightings. In other words, they won't actually hit. If I want to spin 3 real quick, then maybe it would skip from 1 to 3, and I'd miss one somewhere. So my setting wouldn't be exactly what I thought I was dialing it to. But there's not a problem with these. These, you spin them as quick as you want, and they hit every time on the little light on the button lights. It might have something to do with the board he's using, and we'll find out what that is once we get inside the pod here, and we will do that. You know, that's what we love to do here. The knitter buttons here, very nice, very high-end professional knitter buttons, have nice clicks to them, good tactile feel, and a couple of them have these nice guards or covers or shields or whatever you want to call them, so that you don't hit the button while you're aggressively driving and your thumb doesn't go up and hit the button and you do something that you don't want to do in the heat of battle. So we've actually got some extra one of those that we can put on here, and I'll show you all that too, because this whole thing is customizable. We can change the color of the dials. Of course, you can get different covers for your knitter buttons here for whatever you want them for, but we've actually got some lettered knitter buttons up here. This one's for tow, at least that's what I used it for T for tow, P for pass or park or whatever you want to use the P for. So we can actually get little letters put on the buttons if you want to also. Very nice. Again, this is a completely custom setup. When you order one of these wheels, Johan will take whatever specifications you give him and produce the wheel, based on, of course, the shape of the existing pod. Now, let's go ahead and look at the back here. And we can see again that 6061 billet aluminum housing. This is one deep housing here. You can see how deep it is, or thick. And he's actually milled all that out for the electronics to fit in there, or a lot of it. So that's a lot of waste aluminum to get this particular product. So I know that is not cheap when you start taking a big piece of billet like that and just making one pod out of it. Definitely not too cheap to do that. And looking at the shifters back here, these are aluminum house shifters, magnetic. And it seems like everyone is gone to magnetic shifters now, which is not a bad thing. Obviously, that's a good thing. And these have very large or very thick, not so large this way, but very thick, uncommonly. These are about the thickest carbon fiber shifter paddles I've ever seen. And there's no flex in these puppies whatsoever. Now, these are fully adjustable. You can adjust them sideways this way. You can also adjust the actual shifter itself. If you look on the other side here, you can't see it because the steering wheel's there, and we'll look at that in detail once we get the steering wheel separated from the pod. And he's actually got some grooves cut into the bottom of these shifters also so the wires can run in. That's why you don't see any wires hanging off back here, because it's all internal. It goes right into his housing there. Very, very custom, very, very neat. I really like that instead of having just the wires hanging out. Not that the wires hanging out are really going to make a difference in the performance, but it just neatens things up back here. The quick release is mine. I use this off one of my other wheels. This pod does not come with a quick release. You can order one with it, and I'm sure he'll source one for you. This is a Q1R, the best, in my opinion, quick release for sim racing, hands down, period. No argument to it. Really, this is the best. If you ever think about getting a quick release, get the Q1R, period. Just don't even think about anything else. All right, down on the bottom here, we have a very substantial, thick USB cord. This is the thickest USB cord I've ever seen on a pod like this. And we've got the little barrel here with the cinch down that actually grabs the cable, so it takes all the stress off the cable when it gets pulled like this. So you don't have to worry about it being pulled out of the electronics board or wherever it's plugged into under here or soldered to. That takes all the stress right there. And we'll see how that works once we get to the pod also. So, anything else we want to talk about here? Well, that's the basic close-up look at the wheel. What we're going to do next is I'm going to take everything apart, the pod apart. Once we're going to use a different section just for the pod and taking it off, and we're going to change some things around on it. We've got some different colored dials we can use, and we're going to use those. And these are very nice aluminum bits, and we'll get those close up later on. We've got some nice guards in yellow or gold. We've got different colors here, blue, and we're going to use those too. We're actually going to put some of those on here just for the heck of it, because we can. And just go piece by piece. We're even going to look in detail at these aluminum house shifters. Very nice units, and you guys aren't going to miss these shifters because they really are really well thought out and well done, well executed. So we'll get to that when we come back. All right, I thought I would first just take a quick look or do a comparison of the wheel, this Sportline wheel that Johan is using with his wheels. And actually, it's a very good selection. It's made in Italy. You look in the back here. Made in 9/16, so not that long ago. It's got some nice accent stitching in there. And I swear this thing feels just like my OMP or a Sparco. It's just, well, it's a light wheel. It's not very heavy. As a comparison, I'll bring my Super Quadro OMP over. And it's a 330 mil, which is about the limit I would want to use, on a sim rig for driving a race car. And I use this on my 10 tops of the GT cars currently. But I'm going to have to rethink that after feeling this wheel, because it has a nice thick grip. Originally, I had a Momo Mod 30, which is very similar to this OMP Super Quadro, except the OMP Super Quadro is thicker in the handles right in here. And I like that thickness more than I liked the thinner grips on the Momo. So I sold my Momo and went with the Super Quadro. And I just like a thicker grip. I don't know about you guys. Now this even takes it, and you can see here, do a little comparison, that even the thick grips on the Super Quadro is not quite as thick as the ones on this Sportline. So very impressive as far as the thickness and the feel. Now 300 millimeters is pretty much on the limit for me with that button pod. When I've been using this wheel and that button pod attached to it, no problem. It's just right at the limit, I think, on what I would want to use for a roundish wheel on a GT car. It's going from a 330 obviously to this, and we can see the differences. Well, put the black behind it's probably more contrasty that way. We'll take a look here. So you can see the difference. It doesn't look like that much at first, but when you feel them, there is a big difference. So you can see there's some sticking out there and some sticking out over here. But again, that's the difference between 300 and 330 mils. And you can see it kind of hides it pretty good on the edges when you do it that way. So, smaller wheel, but I'm a smaller guy and got smaller hands, so it kind of fits in there. I wouldn't want to go, like I said, any less than that. But I really like the thickness of this wheel compared to even my OMP Super Quadro, which is a very fine wheel, and I love this wheel, don't get me wrong. But it's nice to try other wheels and see what else is out there as far as grips, and I really like this. So I might have, like I said before, reconsider the Sportline wheels. Right, so enough about looking at the steering wheel that's included with the kit. When we come back, we're going to be looking very closely at the pod itself, and we're actually going to pull it apart, and we're going to look at the shifters and see what's inside this puppy. So we'll get to that next. Right. So now what we're going to do is have a look inside this puppy and see how everything works. You know that we love to do that here at Sim Racing Garage. Now, first thing I want to do is I'm going to take this barrel nut off, and you can see it's covering, it goes onto this little sleeve here. And this is a grommet that you can pull out, and you can see the little teeth or spaces on that grommet. So when you get this nut on top of it and squeeze down on it, it locks down on the cord. I want the cord to be loose so that when I separate the top from the housing here, I don't pull against anything that might be plugged in or even soldered on the other side of this board. So now that we have that loose, we'll just take, and there's actually a total of 8 screws holding this carbon fiber piece or plate to the housing. So we'll go ahead and take those out real quick. Put them aside so we don't lose them. Bear with me here, it shouldn't take too long. Now, once we get into this, you'll see that it's taking a piece of billet aluminum this thick and having to mill all that out on a CNC machine. And of course, I don't know exactly how much has been milled out until we get in here, but that's not a cheap way to make a button pod, because you have, first you start out with a big billet piece of 6061 aluminum, and then you're milling all, you're throwing it, basically throwing a lot of it away. All right, so now this top should be loose now, and I should be able to kind of tilt it over, and there he goes. See how it's kind of falling off into my hand. Now I know there's some wires in there, and I got to be careful when I open this up and try to figure out what I'm going to do to keep from hurting anything inside of here. So I can see already, I've figured the shifters probably have some wires coming in here I'm going to be concerned with, and they do. First you'll see the big one down there. That's the USB. So I'm going to unplug that one, and I'm going to unplug the shifters. And I'm going to have to do that very carefully. I'm going to try to get my fingers on both of these here and get inside. There we go. USB is loose. Okay. And there's actually a shifter plugs on here. It's nice he's actually used plugs for his shifters, so we'll pull that out. And we go over to the other shifters and we'll pull those out too. Now that we have it open, we can start using the little bit more room. And there's the unit itself. We'll put this aside for now. Now there was another wire on here, and that was the ground wire right here coming off the USB that I pulled off. It actually came off as I was taking the top off, but we'll relocate that, and I can pretty much tell these two and these two being the shifters, and that's going to be the ground wire that has to go back on. At least I'm guessing. That's what it is. All right, so we've got our circuit board in here, and I'm not sure what kind of board he's using here. A Bodner board maybe? Well, there's only one way to find out. And he's got some nice standoffs in here that are on the other side. Wait a minute, this should be loose. There it is. Look at the wiring job on there. That's just beautiful. I mean, it's just, you got to appreciate craftsmanship. And that's what this is. The soldering is very nice, very precise. Got some nice heat shrink tubing on the connections for the rotaries. Everything's nice and twisted. Little heat shrink tubing there just to keep everything nice and neat and keep the wires routed the way they need to be routed. Now, I don't want to do too much with this because it's such a nice wiring job, and obviously these wires are laying across other wires, and if you pull on this too much, you're going to have a problem. But I believe this is a Bodner board here. I'm trying to find the number. I think I can see it here. Yeah, that's a BBI. You can't really see it. I can see it, but it's a BBI. It's a Bodner board. Very high quality board he's using here. And anyway, that's what you see when you take it all apart. Now, very nice wiring job. Again, hats off to Johan. He is a craftsman, no doubt, to be able to do that and make it look that pretty. Again, the little details. You don't have to do all this when you're making a button pod, obviously. I've seen button pods with wires going all over the place like spaghetti, but you have to appreciate the effort and time it takes to actually plan how you're going to run all your wires and then execute it so that everything works like it should. Right. This is a nice little piece of carbon fiber here. I would say that's about an 1/8 inch in our English system over here. The switches themselves, I'll give you a close shot of those. The rotaries here, let me see what this says. It's just got a number, 1625. You guys can probably read that. All right. The knitters themselves, let's see if we can get a number off that knitter. There we go. I think you guys can see what that says. Right there. So those are a nice quality knitter button there. Hoping that's focusing all right. Let me get one over here. Maybe that'll focus a little better. There we go. All right. So these are, I'm trying to read just a number up there and it says knitter on it. But these are some nice knitter, OEM knitter buttons, the real deal. Really nice clicks. You can hear that. Very good tactile feel. Now we have the little switch here that I really can't get to as far as see what the manufacturer is of. It's really hard to see in there for our little two-way switches. But again, everything looks like to be very high quality equipment here, and the rotaries feel very nice. Now, while we have this off, I'm actually going to take the dials off and replace them with the red dials, just because I want to. And to do that, we have to take a very small 1.5 mil wrench to get in there to the set screw and loosen that, and then the whole thing just slides off. So we loosen that set screw in there, and now we can get the whole thing just to kind of come up and off. Whoop. That's why we use a wood workbench, so it doesn't hurt steel stuff or metal things when it falls on it. And there's a top of that rotary. And I happen to have a red one. I'm not going to do all of them because it takes too much time on the video, but I have a red one here to put back on. Now, the depth of the hole inside that dial is actually more than the length of this control here, this control rod. So you have to be careful when you're putting these back on. You don't want to push them all the way down onto the carbon fiber plate. You want to make sure that they don't go that far down. And it doesn't seem like this one's going to do that anyway. But you want to make sure you got some gap under there so you're not rubbing on the plate, because then it's just going to scratch your plate all up, maybe even scratch up your nice silkscreen printing that's on the plate. So once that's on, of course, all we have to do is tighten up our set screw and snug it down. You don't want to torque it really heavily. You don't need to. Just snug it up a bit. And now we've got us a nice rotary that's red. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty easy. Now, if we want to do the knitters, though, and we want to put a shield, like, say, on the knitter here, it's a little bit different because we have a nut that's going to have to be undone here. And when once you undo the nut around this knitter, it's going to want to come out this way. So you have to keep pressure on the back. But it's pretty simple. You can see there's a hole in here. And all you do is take this button off, and they just pull right off. And then what you'll do is take this nut right here. I'm not going to do it right now, but you just take it and loosen it, unscrew it, and once the nut is off and the washer is off, then you'll put this down on top of it. And then you'll just go ahead and put your nut and your washer back on that part of it, tighten it down, and then we'll snap our button back on like that, and we're good to go. So when we come back, I'm going to have all the dials replaced and have these little covers on there and see how that looks. So we're back with the red dials installed on the board. Very cool. And again, a very easy thing to do. We just loosened the set screw there and took the black ones off and slid the red ones on. Tighten your set screw back down, you're good to go. And you can see we're maintaining some gap under these dial handles so that we're not scraping our carbon fiber board. And I actually looked at the other video, and you can see we've actually done the guards. This is the gold one, and over here we put the blue one on over here. Again, it's just taking those nuts off that you see under those knitters. And the washer, put this on and put the nut and washer on. And it helps to have a deep socket. And this is a 9mm actually, as far as the nut size. Helps to have a deep socket to get down inside of this housing to tighten that nut back down. And I was saying that I saw in our video, we didn't get a real clear picture. Let's see if I can get you one now of these knitter buttons, and just showing you that says knitter on there and has the part number. And again, not a cheapy aftermarket type of button here. These are the real deal knitters, and they do have a tactile feel that some of these other ones that I've seen from the cheaper ones just don't have, and that loud audible click. And again, very well put together electronic board. I really like this. Everything's just so well done. And I did look it up again. This is the BBI32 Bodner board. Again, a very nice board to have for your USB needs. All right, so let's take a closer look at this piece of aluminum. Again, this is one solid piece, black anodized aluminum of 6061 rather, aluminum stock that came as a nice thick piece of stock, and it got milled all out. And that's a lot of aluminum that's gone. Again, that's what I would call waste, but you do have waste when you make something in a CNC machine. But this big chunk of aluminum like that, when you buy them new, before you start milling on them in a stock form, are not that cheap actually. And I wanted to show some detail in here. You can see that he's left some pieces here, and what that does is support the screws. When they're going through the housing, they'll actually go through that little bit there. See how it kind of holds it there, even though it's cut away on this side. Get these wire out of the way for you. So it's cut away on here, but it fits nice and loosely in there. And of course he's got 3 of them because we're only using 3 screws, which when you consider that these screws are passing through this solid piece of aluminum stock here, that is a pretty good support, I would say. I would not worry about the torque I'm putting, even with a direct drive wheel with a Kohler-Morgan type of servo on it. No problem here handling that. And also, as part of this aluminum housing, there is a bit he left on here, and you can see it right there, this thick part, where he's going to mount the shifters to. And that's what you can do when you're doing everything in-house. You can make the design and then test things and then come up with a better design. This is a nice, thick, hard mount for this shifter. There's no flex in that shifter at all. It's a very solid feeling shifter when it's mounted to this aluminum housing. I gotta say, it's the stiffest I've ever felt. And of course it does have a little more heft to it than say a carbon fiber sandwich type of pod with the plastic inserts in the middle, but that's okay. It really doesn't matter, especially if you're running the kind of direct drive wheels that a lot of people run these days. Right, so we're going to look next. I actually have a set of these shifters, and I'm going to take them off, and we're going to take a closer look at the shifters themselves before we put everything back together and give this wheel a drive. So next we're going to actually take a real close look at the actual shifters themselves and how they're constructed. All right, now it's time to take a close look at the shifters themselves. First off, I'd like to say these are some very pretty shifters as far as the CNC machining that's gone into these. Again, CNC machined and then anodized black, just like the hub that we see over here. And you can see these actually gone and went to the extra lengths of actually milling out the sides. I mean, we love to see little pieces milled out. Very nicely done. And he's actually milled in channels on the bottom of this thing, of the housing here, that allow you to route the wires along the internal of the housing. You can run both on one side, or you can one on each side, however you want to do it. But this allows you to route the wires so they're out of the way, and they're sitting flush on the plate, as you see here. These wires are going in and then along these channels in the bottom of the shifter, and then directly into the housing over here. So a very, very neat setup. And again, hats off to Johan for actually engineering and doing things like this, because it would just have been easy to, and it would have been a lot easier actually, just to run the wires outside of the back of the hub and then into some holes that he cut in the back of this hub over here. But he chose to go the extra mile and actually make some routing channels in the shifter, so it's all very clean looking. Yes, you still see the wires that are actually on the switch going into the back of the shifter, but still very, very neat compared to, say, like I have an example here. This is the Martin Asher one, and again, it's not like it's terrible that it's done this way, but you can see how these are routed around the back and then through a grommet, and then they're plugged in inside. So here we don't have that. So I like to show people different examples of how things are done, and this is really, really nice that he's done it this way. Now let's actually take a look at the shifter, what it's made of and how it works. Of course, it's magnetic. It's got a nice click to it. Get a handle on it here. So we got a magnet on the top of the lever and on the bottom of the housing down here. Very easy thing to work on. It's just a 2.5 mil screw over here. We'll go ahead and just unscrew this real quick, just because we can, and we like doing that here at the Sim Racing Garage. Pull it out, and then we can kind of just slide this out of the way. And there's some nylon washers in here that you want to be mindful of when you take this off, to make sure you don't lose them in case they fall off like that one's doing. Looks like one of them's staying on though. And then we can just kind of separate it, and off it comes. Now once you do that, you don't have this magnet pulling on the magnet in the housing anymore. So it will actually just fall out in your hand. And rare earth magnets, again, every piece in here, every little bit is just top-notch, high-quality stuff. And you can see the housing here. I don't know if you can see it that well, but he's left some material as he milled down into to make the hole for these magnets so that they won't come through. So they go in, but then they just fall up against that little ledge that's left on this side. So they can't pull through. Very nice, clean solution in case you ever had to replace the magnet. The switch itself, actually I'm going to take the switch, a switch extra one I got over here, and show you what this switch is. Again, just like everything else on this project here, this is just, everything's just top notch, top flight. This has got the dust moisture cover, a little rubber cover on top of the switch. See a little orange or reddish looking thing? That's actually a rubber sleeve that the switch rides inside of, the actual pole there. Very nice. And let's see if we can actually read what this is. Yeah, a very high use, industry standard type of switch. And you can see it there, how we mounted it. Again, everything is just meticulously done quite well. I'm very impressed by what I'm seeing here. The handle itself is, again, very thick carbon fiber plate. And you can see there's an adjustment for the handle to go in and out, but you can also adjust, if that's not enough adjustment for you, you can actually adjust the shifter a little bit also. The housing can be moved. You can see there's actually, this is the closest you can get it, but you can actually take these screws out and move everything over one, so you have the two screws. You have one screw in the empty hole, and then now the empty hole is back up there, so you've moved it outboard if you need to. So that's as much adjustment as you get there. We also have, he sent me these as an example to be able to show you guys. This is another carbon fiber, but obviously a lot smaller than the big one, for like an F1 type setup. If you wanted to put your module onto a smaller wheel and you wanted the smaller shifters, there you go. And they have 3 different hole sets in them to adjust the reach on those. Right. So what we're going to do now is put everything back together. And it's a simple enough thing to do. If you want to leave the magnet out so it's not really pulling against anything, you just take this, take the washers, put them back on, and make sure they stay centered with the hole as you push it in, which that one didn't, but I can push it in a little bit with my nail. Come on, baby. So you can see it's kind of fiddly, but as it goes in, once you get your hole straightened up, then we can get our screw in. Everything screws back down together. And again, you can see that little red washer that's actually has a bevel or has been milled out to accept the flathead screw. And that fits in there nice and flush. It's a beautiful thing. Again, it's so well engineered. And now all that's left to do is take our rare earth magnet again and drop it in the hole. Actually, it snaps in the hole because it's going to get the magnet. And we're ready to go shifting again. Very nice shifters. You know, I've seen some other shifters that are nice too, and I really enjoy the workmanship and craftsmanship that goes into these shifters, the different ones I've seen. And this is probably one of the best I've ever seen. It really is well engineered. I really like this shifter. Really do. All right. Enough of that. Anything else we want to see here? I think that's it. And what I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and get everything put back together. And just as another, well, I was looking over here, testament to the detail that goes into this. Now, when we mount everything back on, and I'll show you this when I put the quick release back on, we could have just had a washer and a nut just like this to hold the back of the screw that's going to be on the back of the plate. But he actually adds these nylon washers. And what that does is prevent scratching or galling on the metal when you have the screw and this metal washer going against the steel or the aluminum or whatever that you're mounting it to. So again, it's just that little bit of extra effort that Johan has gone to. It lets you know that he's a meticulous thinker. And really, he has done such a great job with all this stuff. And you really don't know that until you pull it all apart and start looking at everything as far as all the ingredients, all the switches, you know, the high quality bits that are just everywhere on this build. And you really have to, at least I do, I really appreciate what goes into that because it's not easy to do. Right. So what we're going to do now is put everything back together, and we'll see what we have when we come back. And hopefully everything still works when we get it back together. So we'll do that next. So now we've got everything put back together. Looked like it was a big mess there for a while with everything taken apart so we could see everything. And it actually changes the look, I think, the red dials. And we did obviously put these guards on here. And when I put the guards on, I actually put a couple of other knitter buttons on there that weren't on there previously. And these actually have some printing on them and different colored buttons with printing. And that's just to demonstrate that whatever you want when you order one of these wheels from Johan, he can pretty much do it for you. If you want a different color button with a different colored screen printing on that button, a different letter, P, T, S, whatever, he can get that done for you. And that's what this wheel is all about. Ordering what you want, get the silk screen printing on the carbon fiber the way you want. It's just it's a complete custom solution if you're looking for that. This is really a nice wheel. It feels like, again, feels good to have it back in my hand and all back together. Now I can't wait to go ahead and get it on the rig and give this puppy a spin. So what we'll do next is mount it up to the rig and do a short little video of actually driving the wheel. And after that, it'll just be the final thoughts. So let's get this thing on the rig and give it a spin. Okay, here we are at Sebring, one of my favorite tracks to test out hardware at. It's a very bumpy track and it really lets you feel what your hardware can do. Actually, this week is the 12 hours of Sebring that they're running down in Florida, and we're also running it on iRacing, so I might see some of you guys out there on track. Anyway, we're in the Daytona prototype Corvette, and the first thing you notice about this wheel when you get in your hands, it's a very thick grip where your hands are gripping it. And I really like that. Some people don't. Some people want a thinner grip, but this one really feels good. And if you watch some of the previous video, you'll already know that I've said that. And even compared to my OMP Super Quadro, this is actually a little bit thicker grip than that. And that doesn't mean I don't like my Super Quadro, by the way. But these Sportline wheels are actually a revelation for me. I didn't even really notice them when I was buying wheels, and I really like this wheel. And if you're looking for a wheel, I highly suggest you look at them too, because they're a very good wheel. And they seem to do the job that a Momo or an OMP or a Sparco does, at least any of them that I've had. And they don't cost as much. And they're even made in Italy. But anyway, this wheel feels great in hand. And let's talk a little bit about the shifters. These aluminum shifters on the aluminum case go together very well. Very solid, positive shifts. More solid and positive than on my carbon fiber button plates with the carbon fiber shifters. But of course there's a weight penalty for that also. The carbon fiber is going to be lighter than the aluminum bits. But it's nice to have that solid feel in the shifter. I really enjoyed using this wheel while I was driving it. And the shifters never let me down. Every time, shift just precisely and perfectly. Never missed anything because of the shifter. At least it wasn't the shifter's fault if I missed a shift. All right, the button layout and the encoder, rotary encoder layout and the switches really comes together here in a car like this, because you can change things like your brake bias, your front and rear anti-roll bars, things like that. And you've got plenty of buttons and dials to do that with. It's great to be able to go through the menus in your black box and choose things, and like your force feedback, you can change the power of that back and forth very easily with this many dials. I wasn't sure when I first saw it about, what am I going to do with all these encoders, but they really come to play when you're into a car like this. So I really like having all these options of these encoders. Everything worked perfectly, never missed a button punch. The encoders, and no matter how fast I turned them, they always did what they were supposed to, never skipped any of the some encoders I've had in my hands before. You spin them too fast and they actually miss some of the notches. Even though you're hitting the notches in the game and on Windows, you can see that it actually misses it when you're turning it real fast. But these don't have that problem. And I got a feeling that's because of the Bodner board that is being used here for this case, or this particular button plate. So, not much else I can say about this wheel, but I really like it. And actually, I like it so much that I bought one. And that should speak volumes that I just had to have this wheel. I couldn't send it back, so I went ahead and bought it. But enough of me driving the wheel. Let's go ahead and get to the final thoughts next. Final thoughts on this custom-built wheel from Solid Sim Racing Gear. It's always great to see a new twist to building a custom wheel. And the fact that more people are getting involved in building custom wheels is very encouraging to me. But at the same time, it's anything but easy to make something that will make people stand up and take notice. And I think Johan has done this with this wheel. By starting out with a piece of 6061 billet aluminum and turning it into a beautiful button case. But he doesn't stop there. He uses only the best available parts, like real MPS 103F knitter buttons and CST 288 encoders from Leo Bodner. Speaking of Leo, Johan also uses his excellent BBI 32 button box interface. The all aluminum shifters are very detailed pieces of work, all the way down to the wiring channels cut into the underside of the housing. Johan uses the thickest USB cable I think I've ever seen and secures it with a top-flight steel cable gland. Just another bit of kit that sets his creation apart from others out there. Let's talk about the many options a Solid Rim Racing Gear customer has when ordering a wheel or button case. Firstly, Johan will get you any wheel that you want to go with your custom button case, with the final build price, of course, reflecting whichever wheel that you choose. But his favorite wheel, and now one of my personal favorites, is this Sportline Comp 300 wheel. Now that these wheels are available in many color combinations, you can get just about anything that you want. You can get a blue wheel, you can get a red wheel, or a black wheel in either suede or leather finishes. And as you can see, just about any stripe and stitching combination you could want. And you also get your encoder knobs in blue, red, or black, along with button guards in the same colors, including a gold or a yellow colored one. And all these parts are hard anodized. You can also get whatever you want as far as a button knob labeling scheme. I have the yellow labeling, but it is also available in other colors, like this blue with a nice white background, or red on a nice white background, or possibly whatever you could think of. Let's talk about the cons of this wheel. Well, a wheel built to this level of quality and attention to detail is not going to be found in the bargain bin. A wheel like this one complete runs 875 euros in Europe and 723 euros outside of Europe. If you want a custom colored stitching or striping on your wheel, of course that's going to raise the price too. The second con, and only if you don't have a direct drive wheel system, is the weight. I weighed the case and it came out to be 2 pounds and 7 ounces. My Asher Racing button case weighed in at 1 pound and almost 8 ounces. Of course, my Bodner direct drive system has no problem with the extra pound, but let's say a Fanatic or a Thrustmaster Logitech system might not like that extra weight. But not to worry, Johan said he is currently working on a carbon fiber version of his case, which should address the extra weight issues if you have them. That's really all the cons I could come up with when I was reviewing this wheel. My hat is off to Johan for building this custom wheel and case. I can really appreciate the blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting this system ready for the market. And if you're in the market for a new custom wheel, this would be one of the first stops on my list to get a top flight made wheel the way that you want to get it made. I know I'm glad I got mine from Solid Sim Racing Gear. That's it for now. I'm Barry Rowland, and thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel.